All right, let's dive right into one of the biggest, maybe the biggest question we can ever ask ourselves. Who am I? It's a question that's been around forever, right? Well, today we're going to look at a really direct, no-nonsense answer from the Indian sage Sri Ramana Maharshi. Let's start with something super simple, something I think every single one of us can agree on. We all want to be happy, right? And I don't mean just for a little while. I mean always, without any misery. And that deep love we all have for ourselves, the teaching says that's really just a love for happiness itself. This isn't just some passing thought, it's the actual launchpad for this whole journey inward. So where do these ideas even come from? Well, they come from this tiny but incredibly powerful text called, you guessed it, Who Am I? It's basically a Q&A session from way back in the early 1900s. See, the sage Sri Ramana Maharshi was asked a bunch of questions, and because he wasn't really speaking much back then, he just wrote down the answers. And what we got is this super direct, super clear guide to finding out who we really are. Okay, so how on earth do you even start to tackle a question that massive? Well, the approach here is actually really logical. It's a process of elimination. We're going to start by figuring out everything we are not. It's like peeling an onion, you know? We're going to strip away all the labels and layers of identity that we hold on to so tightly just to see what's really there at the core. And the text walks us through this step by step. First up, are you your physical body? All its bits and pieces? Nope, not that. Okay, how about your five senses? Hearing, sight, touch, all that? Again, nope. What about the things you can do? Speaking, moving, grabbing things? Not that either. The life force, your breath? Still no. And here's the real kicker. Are you your mind, the thing that's thinking all your thoughts? Even that, the teaching says, is not the real you. It even says you're not the unconscious state of deep sleep. So, after you throw all of that out, what is possibly left? Seriously, just let that sink in for a moment. If you're not your body, not your senses, not your actions, not even your thoughts, then who are you? What could possibly be left? This is the question, the absolute turning point of this whole investigation. So the big takeaway here is pretty clear, right? Our real identity, who we really are, isn't stuck to our body or our senses or even our mind. After going through that whole intense process, just saying, nope, not this, not that either, we finally get to the big reveal, the answer, the heart of the entire teaching. And the answer, well, it's one of those things that's so simple it's actually profound. Once you've stripped away everything that changes, everything you can observe, what's left? It's just awareness. Pure, simple awareness. That silent background, the witness to everything else, that, the teaching says, is the real you. Now we have to be really clear about what awareness means here. This isn't about being aware of the chair you're sitting on or the sound of my voice. It's way deeper than that. Its actual nature is described as existence consciousness bliss. So what does that mean? It means that at your very core, you simply are. You are fundamentally conscious, and your natural state is just pure, unshakable bliss. Okay, so if this is our true nature, why don't we feel like that all the time? Good question. The text uses this classic, brilliant analogy to explain it. Picture this. You walk into a pitch black room and you see what looks like a snake coiled on the floor. Naturally, you're terrified, right? But then someone flips on the light and you see it was just a coil of rope the whole time. Now here's the key. As long as you believed it was a snake, there was no way you could see the rope. It's the exact same thing with the self. We can't realize our true nature as long as we're totally convinced that the outside world of stuff and drama is the only thing that's real.
All right, this is all great in theory, but the million-dollar question is, how do you actually do it? How do you flip on that light and see the rope instead of the snake? Well, thankfully, these teachings lay out a super practical method. It's called the path of inquiry.
Okay, so here's how the technique of self-enquiry actually works. It all starts with the very first thought that pops into your head, the I thought. Think about it. Every single other thought is attached to this I. So the practice is to relentlessly, constantly trace this I thought back to where it came from. So when some random thought pops up, and it will, you don't chase it down a rabbit hole. Instead, you immediately stop and ask, who is having this thought? The answer, obviously, is me. And right then you pivot and ask the real question. Who am I? The idea is that this yanks the mind back from its wandering and dissolves the thought right at its source, what the text calls the heart. So you can think of the mind as having two basic directions it can go, as you see here. When it's flowing outward, externalization, it's going out through your senses, and that's when the world of separate things and people seems totally solid and real. But when you turn the mind inward, inwardness, and you hold it at its source in the heart, that root I thought just dissolves. And that's when the true self gets a chance to shine through. Now, let's be real, this is not easy at all. Our minds are kind of like an elephant's trunk, just constantly restless, always needing to grab onto something. And that's where other practices like meditation can be a huge help. They're like giving that restless elephant a heavy chain to hold. By giving the mind just one thing to focus on, like your breath or a mantra, it gets stronger and more focused. It makes the really subtle work of self-inquiry way more possible. So what's the end game here? Where does all this constant questioning actually lead? Well, the goal isn't just to have a slightly calmer mind. That's a nice side effect for sure. But the ultimate goal is the state the text calls liberation, or even more simply, silence. And there's one more brilliant analogy that explains a really key part of this final state, and that's the idea of surrender. Think about it. You get on a train. You know the train is going to carry you and all your stuff to the destination. So why on earth would you get on board and then insist on balancing your heavy suitcase on your own head for the whole trip? It makes no sense. It's just uncomfortable. In exactly the same way, the teaching says we needlessly carry the heavy burden of our lives, our worries, our problems, when we could just put them down. Trust that higher power, call it the self, call it God, to carry the load for us. And this brings us right to the ultimate definition. What is the self? It's simply that state where there is absolutely no I thought. None. That's it. This state is called silence, and in that realization, all the walls come down. The self is the world. The self is the real I. The self is God. It all just merges into one single, unified reality. And so we're left with one last, really provocative question to take with you. A question that's designed to point beyond all these words and concepts, right back to your own direct experience. If the self is that state where the little I, the ego, is totally gone, what's left?